And then again, I want to remind you, the question of the day that I'm going to circle back to at the end of the sermon is, what is the most embarrassing thing you experienced at a wedding? And so if you've got an answer for that, put that in the comments. I've already seen some pretty interesting ones, and we're going to circle back to that. But having said all that, if you've got your Bibles, I'd love to have you turn with me in your Bibles to the Gospel of John. You can read along on the screen, but I think it's really valuable to have the Word of God either on your phone or in book form, and to turn to the Gospel of John, which is the fourth of the accounts of Jesus's life that begin the New Testament, right after Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And here in John chapter 3, verse 29, we read, "The bride belongs to the bridegroom." This is John speaking, Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist. "The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete." I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a hypothetical. It's kind of a stretch, but a lot of mine are. But I think it's profitable to try and put yourself in the mental space of a young single person looking through your day planner and discovering on some future date that you have the words wedding written there on your day planner. That would be a pretty remarkable thing, to be leafing through your day planner and come across wedding scheduled. And immediately your wheels start spinning. You think, wait a minute, I don't remember this. And you assume, not unreasonably, that it's your wedding, and that for some reason you have this gap in your knowledge. You're not sure when you agreed to marry, who you agreed to marry, where you're getting married, but you have the date for the marriage, the wedding. And so immediately you begin racking your brain and cataloging all of your relationships and trying to think who it is that actually agreed to be your fiance. And when you can't find anybody who indicates that they had already agreed to be your fiance, you start looking for somebody to be your fiance. And as the date approaches, you begin to get increasingly desperate because you still don't know where the venue is. You don't know how you're going to pay for the wedding. You don't know who it is you're going to be getting married to. All of your relationships are getting increasingly tense and problematic and fraught, and it's hard. And then one day you are at an event, you see your good friend, your best friend, and your best friend is there in the company of like the most good-looking person you've ever seen. Incredibly good looking. And your friend is evidently with that person. Your friend comes over to you and you're chatting, and your friend says, I'm pretty sure that I'm just a little concerned because I'm pretty sure you received the invitation, but you haven't replied. And I don't know, are you planning on attending the wedding? And all of a sudden in that moment, it kind of clicks. You're like, I received an invitation. I put it on my calendar, but it wasn't my wedding. It was my friend's wedding. And in that moment of realization, you'd have a very difficult decision to make. And you could go in one of two directions. In the worst case scenario, you might be put out and filled with resentment. Because even though it had stressed you out a great deal, you'd kind of gotten attached to the idea that you were getting married, that you were going to be the center of attention, that you were going to have all the gifts and guests, and that it was about you. And you might look at your friend and say, you're the one getting married, and you're getting married to that incredibly appealing person, the person that I wouldn't mind getting married to myself, and whoa, I'm a little upset about this. You could go in that direction, or you could go in the other direction, and you could feel relieved. I don't have to make this happen. I don't have to get somebody to marry me. I don't have to line up the venue. I don't have to meet the expense of it all. I get the best part of it. I get to be part of the party. I get to show up and celebrate with my friend this good thing that's happening for my friend. And all of us end up having to make that decision about how we're going to react in that scenario, not that specific scenario, but very similarly. And in fact, that's what John has to do in this incredible moment that we read about in the 3rd chapter of the Gospel of John. And it is amazing because if you were John, there might have been a lot of pressure to react differently. What he does and the fact that he can celebrate Jesus the way he does is just so impressive. And it makes me want to be like John. So, what I want to do is take a look at this passage starting ahead of verse 29, starting at verse 22. And we're going to take a look at this passage to get the broader context. After this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. And this baptizing demonstrates an evolution in the nature of his ministry. He is now signifying among those to whom he's ministering that they're entering into a new covenant relationship. Previously, John, Jesus' cousin, had been baptizing, but now Jesus is doing it too. Now John also was baptizing at Ainon near Salim because there was plenty of water and people were coming and being baptized. John's ministry was one of calling people to repentance. So what you need to appreciate about John is that he was this incredibly charismatic figure. He had the intensity of the wild-eyed prophet. In fact, we know that he would dress in things like camel's hair, and he ate wild honey and just lived off the land. And he had this charisma about him. People were drawn to him. They were enamored with him. And even people who didn't know what to do with him and maybe disliked him, like Herod, were still fascinated by him and enjoyed listening to him. And so John was also baptizing. People were responding to his call to repentance. In verse 24, we read on, this was before John was put in prison by that Herod. An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. And so now John's disciples are kind of on the defensive, and they're feeling some insecurity. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about? And what John testified about him was that he was the Son of God, that he was the Lamb of God who came to take away the sins of the world. And John testified about him that he was so worthy that John himself was unworthy even to untie the laces of Jesus' sandals. That was John's testimony about him. They say, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. Now, clearly, they see this as a problem. To this, John replied, a person can receive only what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but am sent ahead of him. And this is where we get to the crux of it. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. He must become greater. I must become less. John endured a test here in this moment, a test of his loyalty to the mission, to God, and to Jesus, the Messiah. And it had to have been hard. It had to have been the center of attention, to have been the focal point of all of Israel's religious fervor, and now to see the crowds decreasing and to see someone eclipsing him in his ministry. There's no way, even if you are an intense prophet, that that's an easy thing for your ego. So I want to point out a couple things that John does not do in this moment where his disciples come to him and prick his insecurities, or try to, by expressing their own. That's clearly what's happening here. They're John's disciples. They've been with him. They appreciate him. They have recognized that he is a voice from God, a prophetic voice. And now they're feeling all this insecurity, seeing the crowds going over to Jesus. So what does John not do? He does not up his game in an effort to compete with Jesus. He doesn't say, well, these are the things that Jesus is doing differently than what I and my disciples are doing, and we just need to match his rhetoric, match his techniques, and then maybe some of those people who've left our ministry to go to his will come back to ours. He doesn't do that. And it would be such a temptation to try to do it, right? But he doesn't. He does not try to compete with Jesus. He doesn't shift like a chameleon in order to be what the new moment demands. And the other thing that he does not do is he does not give up. And this is interesting and kind of surprising. There's no indication that John ever stopped doing what it was he'd been doing up to this time, preaching a message of repentance, pointing to Jesus as he had opportunity to do it, provoking powerful people with statements about morality. He goes on doing all of this stuff, even though the crowds have left him. He goes on doing it until he's executed for his faithfulness. He just doesn't give up. And here's the reason. Well, I'm going to get into that in a moment. But take heart. He does not give up. And in those moments where you realize that you're not going to be the hero of your life's story, it doesn't mean that you just will stop doing what you were doing. It doesn't mean that there's nothing more for you to do. You're just not the hero of that story, and you have a part in it, though, and you can proceed. Let me talk to you about what Jesus does, what John does, rather, because what John does is so valuable and speaks to me. The first thing he does is he uses his platform, and he uses it up. So when I talk about a platform, this is not a scriptural word. It's more a modern contemporary word. Very often we think about platforms in terms of the places where we can command attention, whether it's on social media. I have so many friends on Facebook, so many followers on Twitter or Instagram. That's my digital platform. And then I have a platform as the pastor of this church. All the people who attend this church or who view the live stream get the benefit of my platform, and so on and so forth. And it just sounds so egotistical, doesn't it, to think that you've got a platform, but we all have platforms. And when we have a platform, our every impulse is to try to increase our platform, to make it more secure, to expand it so that it applies to more people, so that it commands more attention. And if I were John, I'd be tempted to say, I have this valuable platform. I have the attention of all these admiring people. And what I need to do is cultivate that, protect it, secure it, so that I can go on bringing them in the direction of Jesus. But what he does is he uses his platform up. He's kind of like a hyperlink. I love, because the first time I ever did it, I felt so clever for having done it. I love when I'm composing emails or things like that, to include the link as a hyperlink. But you know what a hyperlink is. It's when you see that the text is a different color and maybe underlined, and you know that if you click on it with your cursor on it, that it will open up a new web page. It'll take you to a new destination. That's what John is to Jesus. He chooses to make himself a hyperlink so that if he gets your attention and you click on him, you're going to end up at Jesus. As I said at the beginning of the service, in John chapter 1, the first time in public ministry, John sees Jesus, his cousin, coming. He tells everybody within earshot, "Behold the Lamb of God." He selflessly takes all the attention that was on him and shifts it entirely to Jesus, and that is so hard to do. And so in a very concrete, specific sort of way, if I'm in a position where I have done something generous and selfless for, say, a neighbor, so that they are now admiring of me when before they had perhaps been indifferent to me, I'm going to bask in that admiration, and I'm going to think to myself, well, I have an in with them now. And what I need to do is take care of that in that I have and nurture it and grow it so that I have more and more of a platform in their lives from which to speak to them the love of Jesus. But John, with a platform like that, would have said, if you think I'm generous, you need to meet Jesus. He would have immediately used his platform and used it up. He would have said, if there's anything about me that's worthy of your attention, let me just take that attention and shift it to Jesus where it really belongs. I got to tell you, that is so hard for me to do. I don't think I come across as like an egotistical or vain sort of person. The circumstances of my life would compete with that impulse in any case. But I do contend with this strong inclination I have to build my own platform, to take care of it, to nurture it, to protect it. And I want to follow the example of John, who uses his platform and uses it up. The second thing that John does is that he enjoys the moment. He says, I am filled with joy here in this moment. And in a place where his disciples are evidently filled with insecurity and misgivings, John is not. He is happy. He's overjoyed. He has made incredible sacrifices living this painful ascetic lifestyle, preaching, earning the animosity and hostility of powerful people, all so that he can make the way ready for Jesus. And Jesus has now arrived, and Jesus is just as good and wonderful as he had hoped and expected that the Messiah would be. And now he is just filled with joy to see Jesus coming into his own in his earthly ministry, being followed by people who are admiring and learning to love him and identify him as the Messiah. And John is just overjoyed about this. And when we get eclipsed by Jesus, we can experience that joy too. We can just enjoy that moment. And then the third thing he does is that he keeps going. He doesn't stop. The important thing about this for John and for us is that John doesn't have to change what he's doing because he doesn't have to change who he's doing it for. At that moment when you realize that Jesus is going to eclipse you, that you're not the center of the story, if all along you've been doing what you've been doing in order to bring him glory, in order to serve him, in order to advance the gospel, in order to build up his kingdom, you can just keep going because nothing has really changed. Your purposes remain the same. And that's John's wonderful position here. Well, John goes from, at the beginning of John's ministry, it seems like it might be a movie all about him, like he's the lead character. But he says, no, the story of my life is one in which I am, at best, a supporting actor. And he makes this powerful case that he must decrease and Jesus must increase. It's really hard to do, but it has a powerful effect. When you were a little kid, the first time that you saw the moon, you might have lacked the scientific insight to appreciate the fact that the moon is this incredibly huge celestial body in the sky. And you might have been forgiven for assuming that it's actually about the size of a quarter. Because as a child, looking at it, that's about the size it looks to be. But perceiving it as a quarter-sized object doesn't make it that small. Many of us, when we meet Jesus for the first time, kind of see him that way. He seems really small, diminished by his distance into the past. When we see him the first time, we basically just see all the stereotypes about him. And he looks like the kind of thing or person that we could just slip into our back pocket and keep there. But as time goes on, we get to know him better when we read the accounts of him in the Gospels. And he begins to make himself real to us, and we internalize who he is. It's hard to keep him that small. He starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And for a lot of us, we might even come to a saving faith at a point where he still seems pretty small in our estimation. He's capable of saving us, even when we don't fully comprehend how big he is. But the whole conversion process for us is one of getting to that inflection point where he finally is bigger than we are, and we're glad of it. Where we no longer resist that process of our decreasing so that he can increase, but welcome it and view it as not just the salvation of our souls, but the source of our joy, as it was for John. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 39, I love how Jesus puts it in this passage. He says, "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." It seems very counterintuitive and contrary, even. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. And I think the point here is that for most of us, before we come to Jesus, I guess for all of us, our life is misplaced in our own estimation because we've placed it at the center of the narrative. And that's pretty inescapable and understandable, honestly. We grow up, and from infancy, we are self-absorbed. We perceive everything in relation to us. But when our life is in the center, it's misplaced. And it's only when we step aside, when we say, I'm not the groom, but I'm the friend of the groom, that real joy is unlocked and possible for us. I need to make a confession about last week. So at the beginning of this service, we had one of those videos where I interviewed a local pastor. Last week, I interviewed Tim Owens, the pastor of Mission City Church, which, being honest with you, is probably the church in our area that triggers my insecurities the most because of the evidence of its success. And there are times where I'm tempted to measure myself against Tim Owens in a way that's critical of me and my success, and it's ugly. So I was really pleased with the work of the Holy Spirit in me that prompted me to start with him and to overcome my insecurities by bringing him into our live stream and a platform. And the thought crossed my mind, what if some people hear him and they think, well, he seems like a cool guy and his church is meeting in person and I could attend there? And that was an insecurity that I had to deal with. But here's the confession. I had to edit down the 8 minutes to fit in our service. And I had to make some decisions about what to edit out. And there was a portion of the longer interview that I edited out because, well, in the end, my insecurities got the better of me. It was when Tim Owens was talking about the revival that they felt they were experiencing there at Mission City, about people who were coming to saving faith through relationships with people who were part of that church, not even through the services, but about the baptisms that they were able to celebrate recently. And it was too much for me to share. I failed that test. I did not rise to the level of John's faithfulness and fidelity. I should have featured it. I should have said, behold, the Son of God, because it's not about Tim Owens or Mission City or any other church. It's about what Jesus is doing, and he is doing things. And whether he's doing it in the context of our ministry or somebody else's, it is worthy of celebration because Jesus is worthy. He is so powerful, and he is saving people from sin and death today. And wherever it happens, whenever it happens, to whomever it happens, I want to be the loudest in celebration, drawing attention. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And I failed that test last week, and I'm probably going to fail it again at some point. But brothers and sisters, let this be our rallying cry. And I'm not saying this to beat myself up. I want to be filled with joy, the kind of joy that John testified to, because this is not about me. I'm not the groom, but I'm part of the wedding party, and I want to celebrate like I am. So if you struggle with insecurity, if you struggle with anxiety, I want to assure you, it would be an incredibly embarrassing thing to show up at the wedding thinking it was your wedding and finding out that it isn't. But This is something where we're all invited to a wedding. In the book of Revelation, it tells us that someday we're going to sit down to the wedding feast of the Lamb. We, as part of the church, are part of the bride of Christ. And we all have a place at a wedding at which there will be no embarrassment. There will be no insecurity. There will be no anxiety. There will only be joy and, I trust, a really good spread. And I look forward to that day, and I want you to be there with me. And so if you've never put your faith in Jesus Christ for salvation, let's do it today. I would encourage you, if you're feeling moved, to take that step of faith for the first time or to renew your faith. Maybe you walked away from your faith a long time ago. Reach out to me. You can always get me by text or phone at 483-3002, 802, 483-3002. And having said all that, I want to see if there are any responses to the question of the day. What's the most embarrassing thing? I trust none of you showed up at a wedding thinking it was your wedding and discovered that it wasn't. But are there any responses to this question? What's the most embarrassing thing you experienced at a wedding? And this is Ed Hackett. He says, when I pronounced the last name of the couple at the conclusion of my first wedding in ministry, 2 weddings were already set up before I began ministry there. I announced them with the name of the couple I was to officiate for the following week. Oh, brother. I feel that. I feel that for sure. Carol Fish says, I was horrified as I watched my sister's chair collapse as she sat down for the meal at my daughter's wedding. Oh, that would be very painful indeed. Sharon Diefendorf says, more funny than embarrassing, but my brother-in-law put a ball and chain on Dick's leg right after we said our vows. Oh, man, what a jokester. And Suzanne Wood says, at my brother's wedding, there was a huge snowstorm, and my sister, who was a bridesmaid, dropped one of her shoes on the way. So we stood at the entry of the church to ask each woman wearing black heels who entered if they were a size 8.5, and if we could borrow them for her. And yes, someone did let her borrow them. That is amazing. And Carrie Fingland says, the guests dancing at our wedding broke the dance floor. Oh, man, these are some great responses. Well, praise the Lord. The wedding that we have to look forward to at the end of time is going to be a happy occasion, again, where there is no embarrassment. I want to remind you that if you found anything about today's service challenging, encouraging, comforting, inspiring, I would encourage you to please share it with somebody. Take the link for the YouTube video or Facebook and share it with your friends. And we are so grateful for your participation with us in this.